Our next guest is attorney Blake Harris. He's an asset protection attorney in Miami, Florida. Welcome to today's show, Blake.
Tom, great to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Now, I know a little bit about you, but tell the audience, tell me a little bit about your background and how you got into this area of the law.
So I will tell you this, Tom, they do not teach offshore asset protection in law school. Shortly after I started my law firm over a decade ago, my office was located just a few blocks away from another attorney. His name was Barry Engel. Barry Engel was the original attorney in this industry. He's the one who drafted the initial Cook Islands Trust legislation back in the 1980s. Barry was a mentor of mine for many years before he passed away. During our time together, he taught me a lot about this industry. I also have made quite an effort to get out in the field. I've visited around 50 different countries, met with trust companies, protectors, bankers from all over the world, and have built up a global network in the asset protection field, which I don't think anybody else can boast. On top of that, I've been very successful in our marketing. We have hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, which has brought a lot of clients, and those clients have brought a lot of experience. So it's really been a matter of finding the right mentor, getting out in the field, and just simply doing a lot of the work.
You know, it's interesting. I wrote a recent book where I said there's three phases of wealth. Phase one is building wealth. That's who wants to be a millionaire. Phase number two is protecting wealth, who wants to stay a millionaire. And then stage number three is distributing wealth, who wants to live and give like a millionaire. And so I know what asset protection is, but please explain to our audience, what is asset protection?
Well, it's exactly what you just said. It's that second stage. A lot of people are very good at the building the wealth, and they may overlook the next two steps, or they may just jump right to the third step. But that second step is, in my opinion, kind of the most important. It doesn't do you any good if you've accumulated all this wealth. So what we do is we help clients rearrange their financial affairs, so in the event that they go through a lawsuit or a divorce, we're able to help them shield their wealth. It is a process that my firm focuses very narrowly on. We don't do anything beyond asset protection, and we use offshore structures because these tools are much more protective than domestic tools.
So now, what are the most common types of lawsuits, and how does asset protection fit to protect against those?
So in the United States, if you are successful enough, you can expect to be sued at some point. I consider it a badge of success. There are millions of lawsuits filed every single year in the United States. There are billions of dollars ordered to be paid out in judgments every few days. By putting together an asset protection plan before you get sued, you're going to have the ability to negotiate with the creditor. You're going to be able to tell them, even if you move forward with this lawsuit and they get a judgment against you, they're not going to be able to collect. And when a plaintiff learns this, when a plaintiff attorney learns that they're not going to get paid, they're much more willing to either drop their case or take a settlement offer.
Wow, you said billions in every few days are being paid out?
So there's millions of lawsuits filed every single year and billions of dollars in judgments paid out every few days.
Wow.
And the majority of lawsuits are not being brought against super wealthy. Most lawsuits are filed against individuals with under $2 million in assets.
And that's why I think, even for just everyday normal people, they need to have an umbrella on their liability. There are simple things people can do too. The ultra wealthy need the offshore trust and everything, but everyday people need to protect their wealth as well.
Well, yes, I do recommend buying insurance. However, insurance does have limitations. There's a long list of exclusions that your insurance agent probably did not go over with you at the time they sold you the policy. However, when it comes time to make a claim, certainly if it's a larger claim, there's a possibility that your insurance company may not pay that claim. So what I recommend doing as well is setting up an asset protection trust. And it's not necessarily a tool just for the super wealthy. I'm going to explain this with a quick example. If we have two clients, our first client comes in, they're worth $2 million. Another client comes in and they're worth $200 million. If both of these clients are sued for $5 million, the client with $200 million, my advice is going to be, don't make any settlement offer, fight this case as hard as you can, hire the best attorneys in the world to defend this. And if you end up losing this case, it's not going to have any real effect on your standard of living or quality of life. But the individual with about $2 million in assets, I'm going to say, we need to talk settlement, and we need to talk settlement fast, because if they end up getting this judgment against you, this could be devastating. The majority of people who create an offshore asset protection trust with my law firm have somewhere between about $1 and $10 million in assets. Now, we do have quite a few clients whose net worth is a little bit under $1 million, and we do have a few clients whose net worth is significantly above 10 million, but the majority of people who set up an asset protection trust have a fairly moderate level of wealth, somewhere between about $1 and $10 million.
Is that offshore trust the only way that you're protecting assets, or are there some other ways to do it as well? Or which way works best for most people?
So when it comes to asset protection, the first thing you do is you look at any exemption planning. So your home in Florida and Texas, that's a protected asset. Your retirement account up to a certain level, depending on what state you're in, that's also a protected asset. But beyond that, your investment portfolio, a second home, a rental property, cryptocurrency, all of these assets are unprotected. And the best way to protect these assets is by creating an asset protection trust. And so there's two types of asset protection trust. There are domestic asset protection trust, registered in states such as Nevada, Wyoming, Delaware, Alaska. And then there's offshore trust, typically created in jurisdictions such as the Cook Islands, Nevis, or Belize. The difference between the domestic trust and the offshore trust is this. One of those trusts can be disregarded by a U.S. court. Under Article 4, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution, every state has to give full faith and credit to the judgments from other states. I mean, if you created a trust, let's say in Nevada, but somebody gets a judgment against you in California, they could potentially use that judgment to break your trust. You don't have to worry about any of that with an offshore trust. The amount of protection, the amount of settlement leverage that you get, it is night and day. It is much better. Asset protection really is a binary concept. Either you have a structure which a U.S. court can break, or you have one which a U.S. court cannot break.
So what are the federal or tax rules with the offshore trust so that you can stay legal doing everything? I think that's what scares some people is they say, well, offshore kind of sounds like there could be a problem. Are there tax rules that you have to follow?
So there's a few things that you said that I'd like to address. As far as the taxes are concerned, it is a tax-neutral structure. The trust does not increase your taxes whatsoever. It does not decrease your taxes. It does need to be reported to the IRS, and we provide our clients a detailed memorandum on how to compute those reporting requirements. Is it legal? Yes, absolutely, it's legal. And on top of that, it is ethical. Lots of Americans, nobody watching this show, but a lot of Americans, I think, have a very narrow-minded view of the world. They think anything outside the United States is dangerous, whereas I think a lot of the rest of the world looks at the United States and thinks kind of just the opposite. But the reality is the people who are going to be more successful in the decades to come are willing to look globally for solutions to their problems. And as far as the ethics of it, I do not buy this philosophy that there's anything ethical or moral about being weak, about being unprotected, about being vulnerable. I think the most ethical thing that an individual can do is make themselves as strong, as protected as possible. And there's no better way to do that with your wealth than with an offshore asset protection trust.
Now, I've heard about LLCs, limited liability companies, and that they can be broken easier than some trusts. Can you tell me, like I know people who have property in an LLC because they're trying to keep that from being, if they got sued, they didn't want the property to be taken.
So an LLC, I don't necessarily consider an asset protection tool. I consider it more of a liability reduction tool. So let's say that you own a piece of rental property, and I think of an LLC like a sewer cover. You put that sewer cover on top of that rental property. If somebody injures themselves on their property, the toxic lawsuit is not going to bubble up and affect your other assets. However, if you get sued personally, you go through a divorce, you cause a car accident, somebody can sue you, lift up that sewer cover, and take property out of that LLC. So while an LLC is a helpful component of an overall asset protection strategy, it's not something I would rely on alone for protection.
You mentioned several different offshore jurisdictions. Which one do you think is the best?
So in terms of offshore jurisdictions, there's more than a dozen different countries which will allow you to set up an asset protection trust. But in terms of countries which have good codified laws supported by case law, and they will gladly and frequently work with Americans, there's really three main options. There's the Cook Islands in the South Pacific, Nevis in the Eastern Caribbean, and Belize in Central America. While I like the laws in Belize, the regulators there have been a little bit inconsistent. It makes me a little bit uncomfortable as the first choice of place to set up a trust. Nevis has great laws in place. Their government has shown an interest in protecting this business, and it is a good choice for setting up an asset protection trust. However, the best choice, the primary location that we set up asset protection trust is the Cook Islands. The Cook Islands, they've been in the business longer than anyone else. They have excellent case law. Their government is very friendly and supportive of the business. It's also a very safe place to do business, and its increased distance from the United States deters people from going to the Cook Islands. So the Cook Islands right now is the primary jurisdiction that we're recommending for asset protection.
I just flew over the Cook Islands. We were just in Australia, and we flew back over the Cook Islands, and I had somebody say what a great place it is. It's a tremendous place to visit, so I'm looking forward to getting there somewhere.
It's beautiful. I go every single year.
Now, some people are worried about the safety of working with a foreign trustee or a foreign bank. You kind of went over that, but kind of maybe go over that again a little bit.
So first of all, you want to work with a licensed U.S. attorney. That way you have confidence that they have done the right job vetting your international partners, because it's very important that you work with the right international partners. But when you have the right team, and we only work with the most reputable people in the industry, the companies we've been working with have been in business for decades. They're managing billions of dollars in assets. These companies are actually better regulated and supervised than U.S.-based trust companies. Their reputation is on the line with every single client that they take on. And the last thing that these countries want to do is damage their reputation. This is a vital part of the economy in the Cook Islands, and they protect their reputation very closely. On top of that, once the trust is registered, we will open up a bank account for the client, typically in Switzerland. The banks we work with in Switzerland are some of the safest banks in the world. They keep much more cash on hand. They take a lot more risk. So we give our clients the best of both worlds, the best protection of the Cook Islands and the safest place to keep your money in Switzerland.
Now, you talked a little bit about divorce earlier. How important is it for somebody who's got wealth to have a prenup before they get married?
So this may not be the most romantic thing you hear all morning, Tom, but a prenup is probably a wise ideal because the majority of marriages do end up in divorce. Having a clear understanding of who gets what in the event that the marriage separates, does not last, it's going to save you a lot of time, money, and headache down the road. However, prenups and postnups are frequently disregarded by U.S. courts. On top of that, when you bring up the subject of a prenup or postnuptial agreement to your future or current spouse, you may be met with some not positive emotions, we'll say. Whereas with a Cook Islands trust, you can set up a trust, you don't need the consent of your partner, and a U.S. court has no ability to disregard it. So while I think a prenup or postnuptial agreement is generally a good move, you're going to get much better protection, and it's going to be a bit of an easier process to set up an offshore trust.
That is interesting. So instead of getting a prenup, before you do anything, you just put what you need to put into that offshore trust.
That, or I'm not opposed to belt and suspenders, but I definitely recommend having a full, tightly fitting belt on there first.
That is interesting. So what kind of assets are people protecting?
So pretty much any asset an individual has can be protected. Now, as I mentioned, some assets are already protected, retirement accounts, homestead up to a certain limitation depending on what state you live in. But beyond that, the most common assets we are protecting are liquid assets such as stocks, cash, bonds, crypto. You can also hold gold and silver in your trust, and you can put real estate in the trust as well. Now, for stocks, bonds, cash, crypto, that's pretty easy. You can simply have a foreign bank hold those for you, or in some cases, you can even hold the crypto yourself under the trust structure. As far as real estate is concerned, the real estate should first be held in an LLC. That LLC should be owned by the trust. And then some equity stripping strategy may be appropriate, whether that's selling the property or putting a lien on the property and then putting the proceeds offshore. Because even if you have an asset owned by a foreign trust, but it's still here in the United States, there's a possibility that a court could go directly after the asset. So for the best protection, we register the trust offshore and we move the assets offshore as well.
Go a little deeper into that equity stripping. That was kind of interesting. So you're saying somebody has a property, kind of go into that equity stripping again.
So if you have a piece of property, let's say it's worth $1 million, you can put that into an LLC. The LLC is owned by the trust. Right there, you've done a helpful move in making it so that a court can't order you to hand over the property and allowing you to report on a financial affidavit that the value of that property to you is $0. So you've done a little bit to make it harder for someone to take that away. But for even better protection, you take the next step and you find somebody to put a lien on the property. They'll give you $950,000, loan you up to about 95% of the value of the property, and that cash you have, you put that into an offshore bank account in the Cook Islands or Switzerland, and then there's nothing here in the United States for a creditor to even take. Nothing of value. $50,000 in $1 million property, and at that point, it's not going to be worthwhile for a plaintiff to go through the foreclosure process. They're much more willing to just take a small settlement and move on to their next target.
Tell me the process of what happens when somebody gets sued. How does a lawsuit work?
Well, it's never a very fun process for the defendant. It usually starts with getting a demand letter, and then at that time, you get to go out and hire a defense attorney. Next, they're going to file the lawsuit formally, and then they're going to start a discovery process. This is going to quickly add up to a lot of expense to you, the defendant. It's also going to eat away a lot of your time, and if you're a very busy individual running your business, operating your practice, you're probably going to realize this is going to cost me a lot of money, it's going to take me a lot of time, and even if you're being hit with a completely BS claim, you're going to do what a lot of defendants end up doing, and that's end up paying a settlement even though the person suing you has no merit for this claim. This is what I call legal extortion, and it happens very frequently, and I don't want this to ever happen to one of my clients. So that's the reason that we set up asset protection trust, so that in the event that a client is sued, and they're being sued by somebody who's bringing a meritless claim, they can simply say, we're not going to pay you. Now, if a client legitimately causes harm to someone, I am going to advise them to make some settlement offer, but settle on terms that are fair and reasonable. I don't want my clients taken advantage of, and it's so unfortunate that all too often our legal system, which was meant to protect justice, is actually weaponized against successful and hardworking people.
Yeah, I mean, I see that on TV all the time where people are being sued, and it's baseless, but they have to go through it, and it's expensive.
It's expensive for the defendant. Now, the plaintiff, they can bring a case on a contingency fee. That's not allowed in the Cook Islands. The plaintiff may not have even been thinking about suing someone that morning, but they drove down the street, they saw a billboard, they got an attorney who stirred up some business that would not otherwise be brought but for the attorney advertising. So it's become very easy to bring a case and very expensive and hard to defend a case, and slowing down business growth here in America, which is quite unfortunate.
So I'm sure you have a couple good stories of people you've been able to help. Any come to mind?
Sure. So I'm going to give a story. I change out certain facts to protect client information, but one of the stories that I like to tell is a story of Tom, who ran a trucking business. He built this business from scratch over about a 20-year period. As he neared retirement, he found a buyer for his business. They agreed to a sale price of around $12 million. Shortly after this transaction went through, Tom contacted my firm. We created a Cook Islands trust for him. And then it wasn't more than about 6 months later that the new owner saw the business start to decline. Now, the new owner did not understand how to run the business quite as well as Tom, who'd built the business from scratch. The new owner sought to undo the transaction, which was going to leave Tom in the red because Tom had already sent a portion of those sales proceeds to the IRS. The new owner sued my client for $12 million. Ultimately, my client revealed the structure that they had in place, and they were able to settle the case for somewhere around $150,000. Pennies on the dollar. I don't know how things would have turned out if he did not have his asset protection trust in place with our firm, but I'm going to say it probably would not have turned out quite so well for him. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of the cure, and that's certainly true when it comes to asset protection planning.
So what are the biggest mistakes you've seen people make? I'm sure you've seen a lot of mistakes. What are some of the biggest ones?
Well, the biggest mistake is simply putting it off, waiting too long. The farther in advance you have the asset protection before there's any issues, any claims, the better your results are going to be. If you wait until the last minute, you may not be able to set up an asset protection trust, you may not be able to open a foreign bank account, and even if you are able to set something up, your settlement leverage is going to be much weaker. You're going to be looking at maybe getting a 10% discount as opposed to only paying 10% of the claim. So definitely pre-planning is key. Also, working with the right professionals. As I mentioned earlier in the interview, we only work with the most reputable people in the industry. This is the only type of work my firm does. We actually employ a former member of a Cook Islands trust company at our law firm, and having confidence in who you're working with and who you're speaking to is going to give you a lot more peace of mind and get you a better result in the long run.
You know, you're a very effective communicator, I'll tell you that, and I know you do some speaking and teaching. Tell me about that side of your business.
So not only do I service clients, and I am on phone calls and servicing clients, I also give back to the community quite a bit. I teach extensively continuing legal education. A lot of the other attorneys who do this type of work, I've taught them how to do it. I have a vast social media following where we are constantly giving updates on anything asset protection related. I've spoken both domestically and internationally on this subject. And I have written a book as well entitled Don't Let a Lawsuit Take Away Everything. And it's a manual on what you need to know to keep your wealth safe and shielded from our broken legal system.
Now, you know, when I wrote my first book, there was something that kind of sparked it. What sparked you to write your book?
What sparked me to write the book? You know, it just was kind of like my entire career. it came to me. It didn't make sense not to do this, just like it didn't make sense not for me to focus my practice on the one area of law. Although it's very niche, it just fit right with what I was interested in and what I felt I could do well for my clients, and my ability to communicate and my ability to negotiate with offshore providers so I can get my clients good deals, and helping my clients negotiate better when they are in a lawsuit. With the knowledge I'd gained, it just didn't make sense not to write a book and share it. Education is a very important part of the process of becoming a client. We're happy to educate clients over the phone, but a lot of clients like to read or watch videos themselves. And the more that I can put out there, the more I can inform the public, the better. I definitely want to grow my practice, definitely want to pick up more clients. But in general, if I can just help more people have peace of mind that their assets are safe, I feel like I'm doing good in the world, and that's really something that I'm after. Freedom, Tom, does not exist without protection. And what we are doing is giving people protection so they've got the freedom to not only do the things they want to do, but not have to do the things they don't want to do, like work through their retirement or send their kids to the school that they don't want to send their kids to because they lost their money in a lawsuit.
You know, I've spent my whole career in protecting assets. In the insurance business, we do it through insurance, through annuities, through life insurance, ways to protect. But I've always said, you've got to protect against lawsuits. You got to protect against people coming after your assets. I've traveled all over the world, and people think wealthy people are in New York City or in LA or Miami. There's wealthy people everywhere. Everywhere I go, I'm amazed that you can be in El Paso, Texas, and there's hundreds of millionaires in El Paso and Albuquerque, New Mexico. I mean, every place there's people with money, and I don't think all of them have it protected. And I think it's so important to protect assets.
A lot of very wealthy people do. A lot of high-end celebrities have done their asset protection planning, and my firm has worked with some that I'm sure your viewers would know, can't say their names. However, a lot of people haven't. There's a lot of very successful people who are very disorganized. They've overlooked certain very important liabilities. And we get those calls after the fact where they say, oh, we've been hit with this lawsuit. What do we do now? And I say, well, the best thing we could do is turn back the clock a little bit. Now, in certain cases, a lawsuit is just a wake-up call. It's something small that they can settle out, and we can set up a trust to protect their other assets going forward. But it's not unusual that very successful, very high-end, very high-profile individuals have not done their asset protection planning. A lot have, but there's a lot of people in that position that I would say are a bit disorganized, and if you are their advisor pointing them in the right direction, you're definitely watching out for their best interest.
One of the things I would think some people would be concerned about is how much control would they still have of that asset if it's moved into Cook Islands. Like tell me how the trustee thing works and how you would still maintain some amount of control over that.
Sure. The goal is to own nothing but control everything. And essentially with a offshore trust properly structured, you're not losing any real control. You tell the trustee to distribute funds, they'll distribute funds. You tell the trustee to invest your assets a certain way, you can still invest your assets exactly as you have them invested right now. The trust in no way limits your options to investments. If the situation comes where a trustee is asked to do something that you don't actually want them to do, for example, you're under court order, the court has ordered you to request a distribution of $1 million, you will comply with the court order. But the trustee who sits off in a foreign country that's not subject to U.S. court orders will not honor that request. Otherwise, generally anything you request, the trustee will comply with, because if they don't, well, we have the ability to change the trustee, we have the ability to take away a lot of the other business we've sent the trustee. So the reality is the trustee is going to do everything you tell them to do, everything you want them to do, provided you're not acting under any form of legal duress or coercion.
I can see why somebody should deal with you, but what do you do different than other law firms in Miami?
So first of all, we work with clients from all around the world. We have offices in Miami, New York, Denver, and Dubai, but our client base is global. As far as what makes our law firm special in this field is, as far as I know, we have the nation's largest exclusively offshore asset protection law firm. We also hold several records in the industry. We have been told on many occasions on video by the leading Cook Islands Trust Company that our law firm has, over the past few years, registered more trusts with them, more offshore trusts, than any other law firm in the world. On top of that, as far as our track record is concerned, I've been doing this for over a decade. We've never once lost a penny for a client. We have excellent Google reviews. We have over 70 Google reviews, every single one's a 5 out of 5 stars. We give very good response rates, and we are very glad that we are able to offer a flat fee pricing so clients know exactly what they're getting into with us. They're not surprised by any hourly billing down the road.
I mean, I've been fascinated with this interview today, Blake. Now, how does somebody get a hold of you? If they say, look, I got some money, I want to protect it, or I'm going to be getting married, but I better put some protection on it before I get married. How can they get a hold of you?
Call me or send me an email. My website is blakeharrislaw.com. If you contact our form, if you fill out a contact form, a member of our team will reach out very shortly to get you scheduled with a call with myself or another attorney at our law firm. It takes about 30 days to get a trust established, and it takes another 30 days to get all the assets moved into the trust as well. On top of that, as I mentioned, I'm very active on social media. On all of the major platforms, my handle is @BlakeHarrisLaw. We're posting a few videos a day, constantly educating and sharing a little bit of humor in my travels as well. I get out into the field quite a bit. I keep very close relationships with all of our international partners, and I'm documenting this all online.
Thank you, Blake, for joining me today, and thank you all for watching another episode of Financial Freedom with Tom Hegna.